I received my second dose of the Pfizer vaccine on January 2nd, and within 10 days I was paralyzed in the hospital, and I am 19 years old.
I just felt something wrong on the left side of my chest.
My face was burning and tingling.
I can't feel my face. The first time I said those words was 10 months ago.
I have facial paresthesia and nerve pain all day long for the last 5 months.
The last time I said those words was 2 months ago, but I'm one of the lucky ones.
I went to the emergency room probably 15 times throughout this 2-month span after the shot.
And many people who've had this experience have been silenced because we're told that our story is not significant because we are merely anecdotal.
Join us at Specialty Cinema for the second screening of Anecdotals in Bermuda on Monday, April 17th at 7 p.m. Tickets are available at Specialty Cinema or jointhecast.org.
PhD in cellular and molecular biology. And she did a testimony back in 2021 that talked about some of the basics of what we think we know about vaccines and how what we think we know isn't actually what is actually going on. And it lays down the foundation of subsequent things that we built on. So take a listen to her, and then you can make your own judgment.
Hello, my name is Dr. Christina Parks. I received my PhD in cellular and molecular biology right here in the state of Michigan from University of Michigan Medical School. And so I'm very well versed in the science of both these mRNA gene therapy, vaccines, this kind of technology, as well as what a vaccine is designed to do in the body, what it can do, what it can't do, and the fact that this is extremely complex science that has been oversimplified in the media to basically take away our freedom of choice. What I want to address today in this limited time is the fact that vaccine requirements and mandates are based on the faulty assumption that the vaccines in question prevent transmission of the pathogen, right? Does the vaccine for DTaP prevent transmission? No. Does the vaccine for flu prevent transmission? No. Do the vaccines for COVID prevent transmission? No. In fact, they were never designed to do that. All right, so you're asking, what about this 95% effectiveness? If you look at those clinical trials, they do not say that they prevent transmission. They expressly say that they're measuring whether they attenuate symptoms. So they're 95% effective based on their clinical trials at attenuating symptoms for the first variant, which is essentially gone in our population. Right now, the predominant variant is the Delta, and CDC Director Walensky basically said that these vaccines have no ability to prevent infection by and transmission of the Delta variant. Our policy needs not to be built on the hope of what we think something we want it to do, but what the data actually tell us. So do these viruses do the vaccines prevent the virus from infecting and replicating in the nose and nasopharynx? No. They've only been shown to prevent that replication in the lungs. They're different. The mucosa is very different than the lungs. It's very different than the blood. You inject it to the blood, you make antibodies in your blood. The virus isn't infecting your blood. It's infecting your mucosa, and you don't produce any IgA to neutralize it. In fact, recent studies have shown that the vaccinated, especially with the Delta variant, and the unvaccinated have similar amounts of virus in their nose and throat. In Barnstable, Massachusetts, the CDC tracked an outbreak of 469 cases of COVID. 74% occurred in fully vaccinated, and 4 out of 5 of those hospitalized were vaccinated. All right, so maybe they are mandating this because they just didn't know with the COVID. And so my main complaint is with our health agencies and the CDC, who basically know better and are misleading the public. So let's look at DTaP, which the scientists and the CDC have known since 2014 that the acellular pertussis vaccine does not prevent people from getting infected with the pertussis bacteria and passing it to others. In fact, it was never designed to do that. The vaccine was designed to neutralize the pertussis toxin. Pertussis, we know it as whooping cough. It can be fatal for children under 6 months. So neutralizing this toxin saves lives. All right, I'm not going to debate that. But what it doesn't do is neutralize the bacteria. So what happens is fully vaccinated children go to daycare, they pick up that bacteria, and they come home and they give it to their newborn brother or sister. They get deathly ill, and they go to the hospital. Hopefully, our medical professionals are able to save them. But who do they blame? Now the CDC is blaming anti-vaxxers for the limitations of this vaccine design. I suggest that they be transparent and tell parents that although it is preventing severe disease in their children, it is not preventing transmission, because we have created a whole class of asymptomatic pertussis carriers who are increasing the disease. Now, the old DTP vaccine that many of you who are my age or older got did prevent transmission. When we switched to the safer acellular version, they knew that it was never designed to prevent transmission. It was safer, it had less adverse events, but pertussis cases have gone through the roof. There's a resurgence in pertussis because of the design of the vaccine, and the vaccinologists know this. They're trying to address it, and so we cannot mandate that something that does not prevent transmission. All right, what about the flu vaccine? Well, they have shown that basically there's no difference, there's no statistical difference if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, whether you get the flu or not. But it's even worse because although that first year it is somewhat effective, it's about 65% effective at preventing symptoms in you, after that, it actually has negative efficacy. And I want to address this because it's very important. Vaccines are made to a specific variant, and when that variant mutates, the vaccine no longer recognizes it. And so it's like you're seeing a completely new virus. And because that's so, you actually get more severe symptoms when you're vaccinated against one variant, and then it mutates, and then your body sees the other variant. So there's the potential, and the science shows that, in fact, with the flu, if you get vaccinated in multiple years, you are more likely to get severe disease, you are more likely to have more viral replication, and you are more likely to be hospitalized, both in adults and in children. We are seeing the same thing in COVID with the Delta variant. And so we are mandating that people get a vaccine that could actually make them more sick when they're exposed to the virus. In fact, this week, a paper came out, and what it showed is that with this Delta variant, when you're vaccinated, your body makes antibodies that are supposed to neutralize the virus, but they were supposed to neutralize the old variant. When they see this new variant, what they're doing is the antibodies are taking the virus and helping it infect the cells. All right, that science was just published this week. We need to be looking at the science, and we need our policy to reflect the science, and we also need it to reflect our rights. Okay. And so, as a PhD who knows the science, I'm in the category of the most vaccine hesitant group. Yes, PhDs are the most vaccine hesitant, followed by people who have less than a high school degree because they know what they don't know and they don't trust their government. And many people, the other group that is very vaccine hesitant, are African Americans. 70% of African Americans have not taken this vaccine. Why? Because they don't trust their government. Do they have reason not to trust their government? Well, between the years of 1930 and 1970, the CDC conducted the Tuskegee experiment, where they took untreated males with syphilis and they refused to treat them. Even after antibiotics became available, they still did not treat them, and they did not tell them that they had syphilis. They told those people that they were there to secure their health, and they did not secure their health. They abused them. You say, well, that was in the past, although I don't think 1970 was that long ago. Well, in 2012, whistleblower William Thompson came forward and said, we published a study that said MMR does not cause autism, but we lied. In fact, we shredded data that showed that when black boys are vaccinated on time, they have increased rates of autism diagnosis. And we shredded it and we left it out of the paper. As an African American and a PhD, I want to ask each of you, are we going to exclude 70% of African American people from the workforce and from education? Right, my ancestors did not work this hard. I come from a family that worked very hard, and I'm very aware that my privileges are dependent on the work of my grandmother and my great-grandmother, and I have great respect for these people that put me where I am. And yet you're telling me that my son will not be able to be educated if, based on the history of African Americans in this country, that he doesn't want to be vaccinated? All right, so I will leave you with that question. Who are we going to exclude from the workforce? Are we going to continue with discrimination and segregation in the United States of America? Thank you.
So now that we've established a baseline, why don't we look at some other studies that actually prove some of our other thoughts about things like masks maybe weren't what we thought they were. And to this day, we still see people who are driving in cars with masks, walking outdoors with masks, all these type of things, thinking maybe erroneously that they are somehow protected when maybe they're not as protected as they thought of. And then also let's look at some other things that could protect you better that costs very little money, but it's not being pushed by our local authorities. So let's look at some of this and then let's see what we can do with it.
For a reminder for people, because I know everyone wants to put this behind, but let's look at what they did with the masks. Take a look.
Whether homemade or medical grade, nowadays it's not hard to spot them around Chicago, masks that are meant to reduce the spread of COVID-19.
In order to avoid the acquisition and transmission of this virus, which is highly transmissible, you should have uniform wearing of masks.
We can turn this thing around in 2 to 3 weeks if we can get a critical mass of people wearing face coverings, practicing at least 6 feet of social distancing.
This is the moment to get it under control. Wear masks.
If you are going to be in a situation in public where you may come into contact with other people in a situation that is not socially distanced, you must have a mask. That is by executive order.
The mayor of Los Angeles gave his support to masks in public on Wednesday.
Let me lead as mayor and let people know this is how we're going to be seeing each other.
The one thing we do know, these masks make a gigantic difference. I would do everything on my possible to make it required that people had to wear masks in public.
You wear a mask not to protect yourself. You wear a mask because you don't feel well and you're being thoughtful and protective of other people.
I don't know if you're infected. You don't know if I'm infected. And in that case, the best way that we can go forward is if everybody keeps their droplets to themselves.
We know these masks make a difference.
Yes.
The best way we can move forward is to put this mask on your face and your kid's face. Well, I hope there is science to suggest that that was helpful.
Right.
But, hey, glad it's over now, right? Unfortunately, these are the headlines coming out, really going back to school in January here. More U.S. schools institute mask mandates as COVID cases rise. These are temporary, but it's still happening. And this is Marin County. COVID in California, mask mandate returns to 4 Marin County elementary schools. That was just a recent headline. Even the WHO, think of those bills trying to defund the WHO.
Yeah.
This is the WHO's updated guidelines, infection prevention and control in the context of coronavirus disease. This is their version 4.0 of the living guideline. And if you look what it says, number 1, a strong recommendation for mass use in community settings in high-risk situations. So remember, the high-risk situations, that's what the CDC also, that's their stance. They didn't just say mask mandates are gone and they're going away and they'll never come back for COVID.
Right.
They're tying it to community transmission, just like the WHO is. So that's why
every
you're getting these
flu, every viral season now, are we all going to have mask mandates, get into stores, into our schools, into our workplaces? I mean, this is sort of their dream, right, is to sort of turn us into those hypochondriacs. I suppose we should be wiping down every doorknob that we see also.
Right. And so we may have some science now. This was from the Cochrane collaboration. For people that don't know what that is, this is a global network of researchers. Some say they represent the gold standard in research, and they look at evidence-based medicine to try to inform policymakers and interventions like masking. And this is a study that just came out. This is an updated study on the information they have already put out. So definitely a good read for people that want to read this. Physical interventions to interrupt or reduce the spread of respiratory viruses. They go into hand washing, things like that, and masks. What do they have to say about masks? They say this: wearing masks in the community probably makes little or no difference to the outcome of influenza-like illness, COVID-19-like illness, compared to not wearing masks. They looked at 78 studies to look at this analysis. They also say wearing masks in the community probably makes little or no difference to the outcome of laboratory-confirmed influenza or SARS-CoV-2 compared to not wearing masks. But what did they do? What did they find when looking at all this? They found that the harms of wearing masks were rarely and poorly reported. So you have all these people looking for masks, but hey, let's not look at the damage they're going to do. Let's not study that at all. It's no big deal. But let's look at the fact that they're not working. So that's what they found in this meta-analysis, basically, of all 78 different pieces of literature on this.
And for people out there, I just want to say, I mean, you call us a lot. You're like, what is the best study to show that masks don't work? This is it. I mean, we had Denis Rancourt on that laid this out very early on, all the studies that exist, crunching those numbers. But the Cochrane collaboration is literally the epitome of integrity. They are, totally unbiased, and they do not work for the pharmaceutical institutions or anybody. When they're delivering this to you, this is science at its best, and they are telling you there was no effect. We've had multiple studies that have said that. They have looked at all those. You said over 70 studies now that show that this is a joke, that this doesn't do anything. I mean, you only have to see the people with the air pockets, around their noses. Like, how do you even think this is working? I mean, it boggles my mind, but at least they did the science, went beyond just the obvious you see with good observation, that this is, I think in the end it's just to demoralize us, right? And to sort of keep us in line.
Yeah, and a piece on that Cochrane review, we look at this data, we look at the evidence and the timing, and we keep wanting to believe, that we're just following some events. There's just, random things that happen, and it's not a coincidence. But Tom Jefferson, he's a British epidemiologist, and he's one of the founding members of the Cochrane collaboration. He actually did an interview. He rarely does interview. It was a written long form interview. And he talked about this, and he helped put out, he was one of the main authors on this paper. He helped put out the first part of this study. And this was in November 2020 in the Cochrane Review. And they looked at it. And this is what he said. He said, in early 2020, when the pandemic was ramping up, we had just updated our Cochrane Review ready to publish. And at that point, they were looking at mostly flu studies, how masks interrupt flu transmission. He said, but Cochrane held it up for 7 months before it was finally published in November 2020. Those 7 months were crucial, said Tom Jefferson. During that time, it was when policy about masks were being formed. Our review was important, and it should have been out there. And that's now on record, and that did happen. So you have to ask yourself, what's going on? Who made a phone call? Why did the Cochrane Review hold that up? Because they had the studies. Obviously, they weren't COVID studies because COVID was just starting, but they had the evidence saying, out of abundance of caution, we know this doesn't work for flu. There's no need to put these on all of these kids for developmental harms, for all the list of things that may happen. And so that they have some answering to do. But Del, you mentioned the most sound piece of science here, and on the high wire, we like to stay black and white and really just keep to the science. And I think this might be the final say in masking when it comes to this study. And here's the headline out of this. Please share this with your neighbors. Unattractive people are more likely to keep wearing face masks in a post-COVID era. Study suggests, they say, people who consider themselves attractive are less likely to wear face masks. And there you have it, folks. The science as it's written.
There it is. Well, now we know the secret behind those that are still wearing masks.
That's right. That's right.
Just find a good dentist and then, release the mask.
Now, let's look on the flip side of government interventions, which is personal responsibility, which is how you can do things in your own life to help your own health, stuff that governments won't touch with a 10-foot pole. One of those is vitamin D, and it was really briefly spoken about in the UK Parliament by Health Secretary Matt Hancock. This was early on in the pandemic, and he was asked about vitamin D. Take a listen to what he had to say.
All right.
Vitamin D is one of the many things that we've looked into to see whether it reduces the incidence or the impact of coronavirus, and I've seen reports that it does. So we therefore put it into a trial, and unfortunately the results were that it doesn't appear to have any impact. So that is the latest clinical advice, which of course is always kept under review.
Yeah. So there you have it.
Yeah,
Move along.
the
Nothing to see
imperial
here.
model rocks. We believe in that. Millions could die. Vitamin D doesn't work. We're doing our due diligence.
That's right.
What
And
a shill that guy is, by the way. I mean, just the ultimate.
Yeah, and he said, so we looked at it ourselves because we heard there was some evidence that it may work. So we actually looked at it, our researchers. They must have missed this study or didn't really update their studies with this one. This was in October of 2021. We knew this. COVID-19 mortality risk correlates inversely with vitamin D status. This is an amazing study. It should have been front page headlines for months. And it says this is what the researchers write. This is the background of this research. They say much research shows that blood calcidiol 25 hydroxyvitamin D levels correlate strongly with SARS-CoV-2 infection severity. But at that time, there is open discussion regarding whether low D3 is caused by infection or if deficiency negatively affects immune defense. So the question was obviously like, well, you have low D because you have SARS-CoV-2. It just depletes your D clearly. But this study looked at that and they said this: regression suggested a theoretical point of zero mortality at approximately 50 nanograms per milliliter of D3. And they concluded the data sets provide strong evidence that low D3 is a predictor rather than just a side effect of the infection. Wow. They go a step further. Yeah. They say, despite ongoing vaccinations, we recommend raising serum 25 OHD levels to about 50 nanograms per milliliter to prevent or mitigate new outbreaks due to escape mutations or decreasing antibody activity. I mean, if we would just listen to that, maybe we would have the booster programs in perpetuity here. That's happening.
I remember when we reported on that. It was amazing information.
Yeah. And so now a new study with vitamin D. So that was from October 2021. We have a new study that came out. This is a meta-analysis, again, looking at all the literature out there, kind of the final say in vitamin D and COVID. And this is the study right here, if you'd like to share this. Protective effect of vitamin D supplementation on COVID-19 related intensive care hospitalization and mortality. The big three triad there. Obviously, that's what we're trying to fight. After the reviewers' screening, only 5 randomized controlled trials were found to be suitable for our analysis. So again, we have all these mask studies, everything. We have 5 trials on vitamin D. This is how sad the state of research is. We performed a meta-analysis, they said, and the TSA, this is a trial sequential analysis. Vitamin D administration results in a decreased risk of death and ICU admission. And they go on to say in their discussion, the results of the meta-analysis and respective TSA suggest a definitive association between the protective role of vitamin D and ICU hospitalization.
Wow.
And that really, at this point, is the final say on this here.
And so there you have it, folks. I mean, a lot of you are like, where are the solutions? The solutions are in the health. It's a lot of what we're talking about today. And I'll be honest with you, Jeffrey, I went recently and got some blood tests done, and I was shocked. My vitamin D is low, and I spend time outside. I can't quite figure it out. But those things matter now. We recognize, and look, whether there's new variants or whatever next crazy thing comes flying, onto our shores, we know that vitamin D is this building block of your immune system. And so it's time, folks. We're through it, we've sort of gone through the panic of it. It's now time, I think, to prepare for the future. I mean, Bill Gates is telling you there's another virus coming. I would take his word for it. I don't know how he knows that. I don't know what he's got up his sleeve, but I would take his word for it when they're telling you to prepare. This is how you should be preparing. Get your vitamin D levels up. I'm personally working on that right now myself.
Right. And these are pennies on the dollar. You can do this to help. And it doesn't involve government overreach, masking your kids, putting a 12.5 per 10,000 severe adverse event shot in your arm. So what's another thing you can do? Again, personal responsibility. This is even free. So remember, during the coronavirus response, we'll call it, gyms and fitness centers were declared non-essential businesses. Liquor stores were open, but not gyms. And this, just to remind people, I think I'm making this up. If you don't remember, this is the headline here. The gyms and fitness chains closed during the coronavirus pandemic, and what some are offering instead, they're doing virtual classes and things like that. Same with churches. But now we have a study, regular exercise is actually beneficial against COVID, protects against fatal COVID. That's a new study shows. And this is the study here, associations of physical inactivity and COVID-19 outcomes among subgroups. Now, there's been over 25 studies on physical activity, and they've shown extremely positive benefits for COVID. But some of the questions were, is it across all demographics and age and comorbidities? And also, it never looked at really what kind of exercise as far as moderate, extraneous. So this is what they say here in this study. It goes on to say dose response effects were strong. For example, patients in the quote some activity category had higher odds of hospitalization, deterioration, and death than those in the always active category. So more exercise better. But then it says this is incredible. Results were generally consistent across sex, race, ethnicity, age, and BMI categories, and for patients with cardiovascular disease or hypertension. So
wow,
basically,
so even if
no
you
matter
are overweight, but you're exercising, you're doing way better than someone that's not getting the exercise that is at your same BMI, or that's really interesting.
Yeah, across the board, exercise is only going to help you. It cannot hurt you in this instance. And again, we're looking at hospitalization, deterioration, and death. So 3 things you don't want. And this is a big study here. Vitamin D, exercise. I mean, you can't beat it, Del.
So as you hear, not everybody is in agreement with the way things went down. And that was because what we were told was just listen to the science. We weren't listening to the science. There were a lot of scientists that weren't listening to the science. There were a lot of doctors who weren't listening to the science. They were simply listening to political rhetoric, which was causing issues throughout not only our community, but the world. One of the other things, however, that always amazed me was some of the basic principles on immunity, which we've been all taught in med school from day one, that natural immunity is superior. And yet we were not taught that. In fact, we were taught about COVID that natural immunity was inferior, that could not protect you, that was going to have to wait until vaccine immunity took over and gave us herd immunity, which, by the way, you notice we don't have, because respiratory viruses have yet to be able to be given herd immunity by any vaccine because we don't have any. So listen to this gentleman. He is Dr. John Campbell, and he's a doctorate in his nursing degree, but he's a teacher, he's a wonderful orator, and he lays down facts really well and gives data. All of these people that we've been listening to give data. So that's one thing that you have to be very careful of when you say, well, these are just, people on regular YouTube videos or something that are spouting rubbish. No, they come backed by data. So trust but verify. Listen to Dr. John Campbell.
Well, welcome to today's talk, Friday, the 24th of February. Now, we're going to be looking at the most significant study to come out so far, looking at natural immunity. Now, this is starting to filter through into some aspects of the popular press, not a lot, but it's getting through a bit. You're still not reading about it on government websites very much, but the science is now essentially in place. Natural immunity after COVID infection is effective. After 40 weeks, it affords at least a 90% protection against severe disease, hospitalization, death, any severe disease, compared to people who have not had natural infection. So if you take people that have had natural infection, people that have not had natural infection, there's a 90% protection in those that have had natural infection, which is equal to or better than the claimed figures for vaccination. Not saying the vaccination doesn't offer a protective effect. We're not allowed to say that, but we can certainly say that the natural immunity effect is quite pretty good, as we would expect, as we've been advocating and saying on this channel for some time now. Now, here's the paper concerned. It's actually from the Lancet. Full paper is there. This is the PDF version. And what is interesting is this paper is on natural immunity. It confirms that natural immunity is really effective, and it's funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So good for them, eh? So let's look at it now. So past infection. So basically they take two groups. Group that have had past SARS coronavirus 2 infection. So that's one group. And this is the other group here. No past SARS coronavirus 2 infection. Now you'll see that vaccine is not mentioned there because studies that looked at hybrid immunity were excluded. Now, they did include studies where vaccination was accounted for, was controlled for, but if it wasn't, they didn't. So it's almost like this data is coming from a non-vaccinated world, which makes it all the more impressive in my view. But nothing you wouldn't expect, because the human immune system can recognize 8 billion types of different foreign antigens. You know, the idea that senior doctors were, shall we say, considering the possibility, some might go as far as say intimating, that we wouldn't have a natural immune response to COVID is just completely ridiculous. And to be fair, we've always believed that there would be a good natural immune response. And effectiveness to past infection was rated by how likely were people to get reinfected, how likely were they to have symptomatic disease, and how likely were they to have severe disease. Now, as you would expect, the findings, high levels of protection from reinfection caused by alpha, beta and delta variants. Now, during alpha times, beta times and delta times, depending on where you lived, there was some reinfection, but of course nothing like as much reinfection as we've had during Omicron times. More on that in a minute. The figures there are really quite fascinating. Lower levels of protection caused by reinfection from Omicron BA1, and indeed we know from subsequent Omicron variants as well. But of course, Omicron's causing way less severe disease, so the reinfection is much less significant than it would have been with these previous variants. So less reinfection in earlier times, more reinfections in later times. And as we'll see, over half of the world's population has had Omicron now. Now, effectiveness against, we'll look at those figures in a minute, effectiveness against reinfection with the Omicron BA1 variant. So if you've had previous infection, doesn't matter too much what it is, but the protection against reinfection from Omicron BA1 is only 45.3%. Protection against symptomatic disease, pretty well the same really, 44%. So what we see is huge immune escape with the Omicron variant, and we've known this for some time. So if you've had any form of SARS coronavirus 2 infection before, there's still a fairly good chance, if you're exposed to it, that you're going to catch Omicron. So that is the level of protection. And remember that this is relative to people who've not been infected. So people that have been infected relative to people that have not been infected, 45% protection rate. Not that great, but we know that the subsequent infections tend to be milder. Protection against severe disease, if reinfected with BA1, is basically it's 90%, isn't it? So it gives a 90% protection. But remember, this is a 90% protection relative to other people who have an Omicron who have not had previous exposure. And we know that they're much less likely to be hospitalised. So the absolute risk is way, way less. But compared to other people with Omicron, it's at 90% level of protection. So natural immunity working really quite well there. Stimulating the antibodies, stimulating the B and the T cells, particularly stimulating the T cells, the T cytotoxic cells, and the T helper cells, and as well as the B cells, which actually produce the antibodies. So a wide spectrum of immune response. And as well, we know that the vaccines are only producing antibodies and stimulating B and T cells against the spike protein, whereas natural immunity does it against all the components of the virus, all of the components that the immune system recognizes as foreign. Now, protection from reinfection with ancestral strains. Now, obviously, they're not here anymore, but looking back at the data, looking at the alpha and delta, which was the big problems in the UK and the United States, yes, the immunity declines over time, but protection against reinfection with alpha or delta remained at 78.6% after 40 weeks. And people that were reinfected, of course, were much less likely to get severe disease. So pretty good for the older variants, but then the immune escape came along with the Omicron. So people that have had Omicron before, BA1 in this case, they only have a 36.1% protection at 40 weeks against an infection with a subsequent SARS coronavirus 2. And of course, the only SARS coronaviruses 2 that are around now are Omicron and its subvariants. So possibilities for reinfection with Omicron are certainly there, but they tend to be very mild cases on the whole. Now, this is the most encouraging part here. Protection against severe disease at 40 weeks if reinfected. For the Alpha and the Delta variants, it was 90.2%, so essentially 90%. And for the Omicron, it was 88.9%, so basically it's just a percent under 90, both around about 90% within statistical errors. So that's 90% protection from a severe outcome with an Omicron infection. But of course, that's compared to other people with Omicron infection who have not been previously infected. And we know that their risks are way, way less. So it's a 90% relative risk reduction of a much smaller overall risk. Now, how long this is going to go on for? The study went up for 40 weeks. You know, I can't see this going down dramatically in 10, 20 weeks after this. I think it's going to remain fairly high. So good data there, up to 40 weeks. Now, okay, we can't speculate beyond that because the data doesn't tell us. But what would be surprising is if, like, you've got 90% protection at 40 weeks, and then it all of a sudden goes down to 50% protection. That's not going to happen. It's going to wane. I think we can say with certainty it's going to wane gradually as people are protected from severe outcomes. Now, this is interesting. And remember, I don't mean to be mischievous or cynical, but this is funded by a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And the authors actually say something quite profound here. Let's read. I'll put in the full quote because I don't want to get it wrong. Data suggests that the level of protection afforded by previous infection is at least as high, if not higher, than that provided by 2 doses of vaccine using high quality, what they call high quality. We won't comment on that now. mRNA vaccines is what they say. So, patent admission there that the natural immunity is as good, if not better. Imagine that. Right. Human physiology is actually better than artificial pharmacological interventions. Just imagine it. You know, the idea that a lot of very senior people weren't upfront about this right from the beginning is really quite appalling. There's questions to be answered. Questions to be asked. They'll never be answered, of course. They've all swanned off with the knighthoods and the big payoffs into happy retirement, hopefully, for most of them, or I'll leave you to decide whether it's deserved or not. But these questions are never going to be answered. But we can ask them. And you and me all know that they should be answered, that there is an injustice here, that these should be answered. But they won't be. But there you go. That's what the study is now showing. Now, this is fascinating. As of June the 1st, 2022, a COVID pandemic had caused an estimated 17.2 million total deaths. Now, most of these in people with comorbidities, of course, most of these in the elderly, of course. But still, it has to be said, amounting to a very large number of deaths. Estimated 17.2 million total deaths from a pandemic that was completely preventable. 6.88 million reported deaths, 7.63 billion total infections. Of course, some people are reinfected. Now, between the 15th of November 2021, which is when Omicron came along, data just going up to the 1st of June 2022, 3.8 billion people have been infected with Omicron, 46% of the world's population. And of course, this is a long time ago now. So basically, we know that way over half of the population of the world have now been infected with Omicron. It's probably 60, 70%. We don't know. All we can say for sure is that between November the 15th, 2021 and the 1st of June, 2022, it was 46% of the world's population were infected with Omicron. Therefore, it's generating all this massive amount of protection, as we said, relative to other people who haven't been infected with Omicron. 90% protection against severe outcomes, severe disease, 40 weeks after, and we expect it to last for longer. So this is remarkably encouraging for global natural immunity. We're not going to get herd immunity because of the constant reinfections. This is still endemic. It's going to be there for a long period of time, but it's becoming less and less significant, which is the good thing about it. So there we are. Most of us have been infected now with Omicron. Understanding the need for, why do we need to understand this? Predicting future potential disease burden. So I'm expecting that to carry on going down. Designing policies for travel access to venues. Well, this needs to be encouraged now, because every time we can't advise people to get infected, but it remains true that every time someone does get reinfected or re-exposed, that's going to build up their immunity. So even if someone just breathes in some Omicron, if they've got good levels of immunity already, that's going to boost their mucosal levels of immunity. And this is what we're doing in the UK, where we are living with it. I mean, I haven't had a vaccine since November 2021, and so far, you get colds, obviously, but you know that's part of life, isn't it? Informed choices on vaccines, yes, as we've been saying since the very start of Omicron, the risk-benefit analysis has changed. The UK government, of course, has acknowledged this without acknowledging it. Now there's no vaccines available for people under 50 unless they have special comorbidities. So it seems to me that the governments are trying to sort of, at least in the UK, we're trying to taper down the vaccine programme. And of course that will save the politicians and the senior medical officers ever admitting that they were wrong. Estimated protection from past infection, how they got this information. So huge amount of studies, synthesizing studies, 65 studies, 19 countries, looking at the variants, looking at the time. Data goes up to the 31st of September 2022, but as we say, excluding vaccine immunity and excluding hybrid immunity, but including people that were vaccinated if the vaccination status was controlled for. So grounds for optimism, what we've been saying on this channel for, well, what we've always said on this channel really, is vindicated. The hybrid immunity idea that was talked about and promoted for such a long time, looking increasingly irrelevant, to be quite honest. I don't think I can say too much more than that, so we'll leave it there, and thank you for watching.
Now, what happens if you actually are one of those in charge and decide to go against the grain? Surely, if you're in charge, you can make your own decisions without problems. But as we will listen to next, this was an interview on the High Wire with Del Bigtree from Dr. Joseph Ladapo, who is the Surgeon General of Florida. Listen to some of the issues he's had just because he's decided to not go the same way everybody else has. Listen to this.
Another, dynamic individual in this world is the Surgeon General of Florida. We have reported the fact that he got himself into a lot of hot water when he decided to stand on principle and say this.
Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo recommended against giving the COVID vaccine to healthy children, the first recommendation of its kind in the country.
The guidance from the state says healthy kids ages 5 to 17 may not benefit from the vaccine and warns 16 to 17-year-olds the risk of myocarditis due to the COVID-19 vaccines may outweigh the benefits.
It's deeply disturbing that there are politicians peddling conspiracy theories out there and casting doubt on vaccinations when it is our best tool against the virus and the best tool to prevent even teenagers from being hospitalized.
Centers for Disease Control and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration called some of Dr. Joseph Ladapo's claims, quote, incorrect, misleading, and could be harmful to the American public.
Young children, thankfully, are at lower risk of bad outcomes than older Americans. But that does not mean no risk. And in fact, what we've seen is that COVID has been much more dangerous and deadly than the flu.
FDA and CDC leaders told Dr. Ladapo, quote, "It is the job of public health officials to protect the lives of the populations they serve, particularly the vulnerable. Fueling vaccine hesitancy undermines this effort."
That was a very surprising, unexpected announcement.
I don't know what's in his mind. It's truly frightening.
Well, an amazing turn of events. The World Health Organization has just changed its determination on the need for vaccination, the COVID vaccine when it comes to children. SAGE updates COVID-19 vaccination guidelines. SAGE is the strategic advisory group of experts for the WHO. This headline explains it all, basically saying COVID vaccines are not needed for healthy kids and teens, says World Health Organization. Dr. Joseph Ladapo tweeted out about this. This is what he had to say about it. Under my leadership at Healthy, Florida has been telling parents this since March of last year. Why did the CDC and so many doctors try to convince you otherwise? No wonder there's so much distrust of public health officials right now. It is my honor and pleasure to be joined by the author of Transcend Fear, Surgeon General of Florida, Dr. Joseph Ladapo. Thank you for joining me.
Always a pleasure, though.
You know, you always have a brilliant smile and you carry yourself with such beautiful candor. It must be easier on days like this when you get to have a bit of an I told you so. So I'm going to give you this opportunity. First of all, I'm sure you're aware of what the WHO has said. So what are the details of that? What is it exactly the WHO is now sort of making as their recommendation to the world regarding this COVID vaccine in children?
Thanks, Del. They are carefully trying to dance on this tightrope of saying what the truth is without actually saying it.
Okay.
And the truth is, healthy young people shouldn't receive these mRNA COVID-19 vaccines because the benefits are outweighed by the risk. I mean, it's unequivocal. There's just, at this point in the pandemic, there's not even any question about that. But instead of saying that outright, they use the excuse of other vaccines being more important, and it's up to nations to decide for themselves. But we're not saying you should do it. You can still do it if you want. If you want, for example, to harm the young people in your country. But they're saying what we said about a year ago, and it's based on the data, and that was the truth then. It's the truth now. What else is there to say?
And when we look at this recommendation now, and as you've pointed out, and we obviously have reported on the high wire throughout time, there are real issues with this vaccine, known issues that have been before the CDC, been before the FDA, issues of myocarditis, pericarditis, blood clots, all of these things, but especially and you've done, just to sort of recap, you really looked at this in your own population. Just remind us sort of in your investigation, looking at your population, the data coming in, what is really the high risk group in your determination when it comes to this vaccine? Because there is a higher risk for certain individuals and demographics, is there not?
Yeah, there is. And I think, honestly, the risks with this vaccine and the unknowns are so broad that it's really unclear to me that anyone should be receiving them at this point in the pandemic. But if you want to hone in on specific risks, there are risks with myocarditis and cardiac issues in general, and they really do seem to be concentrated in young people, young men and boys more than women, but they're present in women too.
Okay.
We've done an analysis here of data in Florida, a public health surveillance study, and we found somewhere around an 80% increased risk of cardiac death for young men.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's young men dying from their heart suddenly stopping. It's very uncommon, fortunately, but it doesn't make it okay to increase that risk substantially. And just a few weeks ago, a new study came out in a journal, Nature Communications, so a very good journal, that did a similar, not quite the same, but similar analysis of people and young people in England. And they actually found a 70% increased risk
Wow.
that was just barely not statistically significant, just barely. I mean, just the confidence
Got
intervals
it.
just crossed over one, but it was a 70% increased risk in young boys and men
Right.
of cardiac death. So I mean, eventually, God help us, hopefully they'll acknowledge it, but it is absolutely real, and it makes it just not only senseless, but malicious to be giving these mRNA COVID-19 vaccines to young men and boys at this point in the pandemic. It's crazy, but it's worse than that, because now there's data that shows that it's not some benign procedure.
One of the things that we do here at our nonprofit Informed Consent Action Network is we will bring FOIA requests to CDC and FDA, but we will also write letters and ask questions. And why are you looking at this data? Are you seeing what we're seeing? We want a response to what's going on. We have the power that we do as a nonprofit, but I think even more powerful is, as Surgeon General of Florida, you recently sent a letter to the CDC demanding some answers about what, are you looking at what we're looking at? This is just an excerpt. It's a great letter. We'll have it in, if you're one of our newsletter members, you can read it. But according to a recent study, mRNA COVID-19 vaccines were associated with an excess risk of serious adverse events, including coagulation disorders, acute cardiac injuries, Bell's palsy, and encephalitis, to name a few. This risk was 1 in 550, much higher than other vaccines. To claim these vaccines are safe and effective while minimizing and disregarding the adverse events is unconscionable. You go on to finish this letter by saying, as a father, physician, and Surgeon General for the state of Florida, I request that your agencies promote transparency in healthcare professionals to accurately communicate the risks of these vaccines pose. I request that you work to protect the rights and liberties that we are endowed with, not restrict and diminish them. Very powerful words. They responded with a very, very long set of tropes, I would say, that we're used to, but just to get a sense of what they said, just as an excerpt. The claims that the increase of VAERS, that's the Vaccine Advanced Reporting System, reports of life-threatening conditions reported from Florida and elsewhere represents an increase of risk caused by the COVID-19 vaccines is incorrect, misleading, and could be harmful to the American people. They go on to say a lot of different things and why we shouldn't trust the VAERS numbers, which is one of the only capture systems we have. As you and I both know, absolutely off the charts, reports of death, reports of pericarditis, myocarditis, you name it, anaphylaxis. I think these are the recent numbers. We now have, for this vaccine alone, 34,576 reports of deaths after vaccination, 193,000 hospitalizations, 147,000 urgent care, 226,000 doctor office visits, 10,000 anaphylaxis cases, 16,000 Bell's palsy. They go out of the way to say that just because these reports come in doesn't mean they've been verified and caused by the vaccine. But I think it is disingenuous for them to say that there is not a red flag here when it is absolutely far and above in numbers, so much bigger than all of the vaccines, all of the reports that have ever happened since the beginning of VAERS until COVID. This one vaccine is the Mount Everest above all of that. This is what it looks like when you look at, I believe this is deaths. Look at the deaths. This is the deaths reported to VAERS, and then 2021 and 22, that's what happens with this vaccine. To say that, you're incorrect to point out a problem, it's insanity. I mean, how is it that our public officials, in the face of the WHO, in all the science that is, a tidal wave now against this vaccine, you work in public health sciences, what type of person is still standing their ground here?
I think at times I've thought I knew what was going on, but I don't even understand what's happening anymore. The facts are that vaccine use in Florida increased by about 400%, and these adverse event reports increased by 1,700%.
Wow.
And the life-threatening ones increased by over 4,000%.
Wow.
And we're going to respond to their letter. That's in Florida, and I think it's been seen around the country. And we're going to respond to their letter, which will be fun. But they're just completely disconnected from reality. One of the things they say is that well, there are more reports because it was doctors had to do it. But the thing is, that is a requirement of all vaccines. There's nothing based on the CDC's recommendations about reporting that's special about these vaccines at all. And then you add on top of that the fact that the reporting is an enormous underreporting.
Correct.
And there are other data that indicate that, and that's also been true historically. So it's like, does 1 + 1 still equal 2? I think in the letter we'll have to lay out some basic facts and agree that, do you guys agree with these things? Like, does 2 + 2 = 4?
Right.
And then if we can agree
Can
on
we
those,
find some
maybe
common ground here? Let's start 2 + 2. Let's just really start at the basics here.
Are you sure? Are you sure it means that? Because if it does, it means this. So their house is crumbling, and we're going to help speed that along, just as you guys have been speeding that along. Because the thing that they do that is wrong is that they prioritize their agendas over people.
Yeah.
It's like preserving these mRNA vaccines, preserving whatever their ideology is, whoever their master is, preserving those things is more important than truth and good health in people, and that is their fatal flaw, and they will lose for that reason. Their house is going to keep crumbling for that reason.
Well, we are just happy that you are in there as a guiding light in a state that the world is watching. An experiment, if you will. It was described as an experiment when you and Ron DeSantis made some very bold choices early on when it came to masks and lockdowns and all these things, and of course the vaccinations, and when it came to children. And now your numbers are proving out. You are standing the truth. You're using your databases to try and get information that all of us are asking about. You really, truly are a hero, and you got to prove that in a very special way this week by actually saving someone's life right inside of the Capitol, doing what doctors do best. I want to congratulate you. Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo saved a man's life at the Capitol. The man Tuesday morning suffered a cardiac event in the Capitol courtyard. Ladapo rushed over, performed chest compressions, and stabilized the man using a defibrillator. That's amazing. This is a photo. Is not surprising to all of us. What a great guy you are, and talented. It's amazing. What does it feel like to save someone's life, like be directly there in that moment?
Well, I'm very happy I was there. It's funny because I think if I were an emergency medicine doctor, it would have been like another day, because they do that kind of thing all the time.
Right.
But I'm an internal medicine doctor, and I'm usually not the first person at the scene, so that was a different experience for me. But the guy he's doing well. He's a sweet man, really nice guy, and I'm glad that we were there to help him. Thank God, because he probably wouldn't be on this planet if we weren't there to help him. And thank goodness that he does get to be on this planet, because we all benefit from it. He's a very kind man with a big heart. So and we're going to be getting together.
Awesome. Well, Ron DeSantis, your boss, gave a shout out. Let's just take a look at his tweet on the subject. This is what he had to say. We know we can count on Florida Surgeon General Joe Ladapo to protect Floridians against medical authoritarianism, Fauci's decrees, and we can also count on him to spring into action and save lives in real time. Great job, Dr. Joe Ladapo. It is such an honor to know you, to know that you're out there. I want to thank you for taking the time from your incredibly busy schedule. I want you to get back to writing that letter to the CDC. I can't wait to see what that has in it. And we'll continue to watch your progress, and anything new comes up, please let us know.
All right.
You want to follow him on Twitter? Here it is, Joseph A. Ladapo, MD, PhD, at Florida Surgeon GEN. All right. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time today.
Thanks, Dow. Always a pleasure.
I received my second dose of the Pfizer vaccine on January 2nd, and within 10 days I was paralyzed in the hospital, and I am 19 years old.
I just felt something wrong on the left side of my chest.
My face was burning and tingling.
I can't feel my face. The first time I said those words was 10 months ago.
I have facial paresthesia and nerve pain all day long for the last 5 months.
The last time I said those words was 2 months ago, but I'm one of the lucky ones.
I went to the emergency room probably 15 times throughout this 2-month span after the shot.
And many people who've had this experience have been silenced because we're told that our story is not significant because we are merely anecdotals.
You need to get vaccinated. You need to mask up. And if you don't, you are going to die.
The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them. What else? Or leave them behind.
If we could all just stop having so many answers and listen with wonder and listen with compassion.
We need humanity back. Yeah!
This is not political. This is a human issue.
I don't want what I'm experiencing to have some sort of political bent. I just want my story out there so I and others like me can get the help that we are entitled to.
Being vaccine injured, I've seen hate from both sides.
This is not a left issue. This is not a right issue. This is an American issue.
I'm asking you, human to human, please do the right thing and help us.
Vaccines are safe. I promise you, they are safe and effective.
I would give my whole life savings if I could go back to January 17th and never to have had to experience this in my life.
The benefit of getting the vaccine far outweighs the risk. That's just a fact.
The day I took my shot, I was functioning, I was healthy, I was happy, and 4 days later, I can't walk.
Final bit of audio we're going to listen to is based upon what I spoke about earlier on in this series, which was about the Pfizer documents that were initially asked to be held for 75 years from the public and were forced through the courts to be released. And there were tens of thousands of pages, which the average person wasn't going to be able to read. But through wonderful people who decided to come together and put this down under base level of thought, of the ability for the average person to read, they put this all in a concise book, which this person, Miss Naomi Wolf, helped to organize. And so we're going to listen to her. She did a conference at Hillsdale College about this, and it was about what was in all those Pfizer documents. What did Pfizer know before they actually went ahead and put this out to the public, to the world, to our island, to every continent to see? So let's listen to this last one. It's about an hour, but a little less than that. But I think it is worth your time to invest in. So let's listen to this.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Hilliker, and I am a sophomore biology major here at Hillsdale, and I have been given the pleasure of introducing the speaker for this evening. Naomi Wolf is an author, columnist, professor, and co-founder and CEO of Daily Clout. She earned a BA from Yale University and a PhD from New College, Oxford University. A former Rhodes Scholar and Research Fellow at the Rothermere American Institute and Barnard College. She has taught as a visiting professor at SUNY Stony Brook and at George Washington University as a visiting lecturer. She has written for numerous publications, including as a columnist for The Guardian and the Sunday Times of London. She is the author of several books, including The Beauty Myth, How Images of Beauty Are Used Against Women, The End of America, which won the 2008 Nautilus Silver Award, Give Me Liberty, a handbook for American revolutionaries, and The Bodies of Others, The New Authoritarians, COVID-19, and the War Against the Human. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Naomi Wolf.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Thank you everyone for being here. You're very brave, given what I'm going to share with you tonight, but I promise we'll go to a very dark and scary place, and then we'll come out into a place of hope and forward thinking. Yes, but I do admire your courage. And before I begin, I just want to find the words to express how grateful I am to Hillsdale College, not only for inviting me, but for being what it is, which is truly a light right now to not just America, but to probably the world, in helping us remember what liberal arts are supposed to do and what Western civilization is supposed to be for, and what it means to actually take on that incredibly powerful and responsible and sacred task of overseeing the education of young adults from the ages of 17 or 18 to 21 or 22. And out of all the institutions that I've witnessed in the last 3 years, this is the only one in which the students have not been traumatized. I'm so grateful to all of you. So I'm just going to jump right in. I'm a pacer. Is there a handheld mic I might use while I pace? And, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bell. I'll stand here till a handheld manifests. So I should also start out by disclosing that I did spend my entire career on the left. I was an advisor to Gore 2000 and to the Clinton re-election. I'm sorry, I just feel I should share. I should share this. I should get it out. I should just be transparent. And the last 3 years have shown me that my former world has truly imploded, and that now, yeah, sad but true, but the happy part is that now I think something's happening in this country in which left and right really are losing any meaning, and what really matters is what I've found, which is my brothers and sisters are right here in this room. My brothers and sisters are anyone who cares about the Constitution, liberty, and freedom. So I'm so happy to be with you tonight. And I should also disclose, in case you're worried, this is not a pharma hit. I ran after a puppy. We have an adorable new puppy, and he was faster than I am, so that's that. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about what's really in the Pfizer documents. And if I pace around like this, can you hear me? No. All right. Okay. And the reason I know what's in the Pfizer documents is not because I'm a medical doctor. I'm not. It's not because I'm a scientist. I'm not. I'm an English major. My DPhil is in Victorian poetry. But I know what's in the Pfizer documents because something kind of miraculous in the history of intellectual inquiry happened to me and to the world as a result, and it's the following. Some of you may know that a lawyer named Aaron Siri pursued a lawsuit against the FDA to release the internal documents that Pfizer created as part of its rollout of its mRNA injection. And these are internal documents showing what happened when people were injected with this material, and also the experiments that led up to it internally. And thank God for the judge in that lawsuit, because the FDA asked that judge to keep these documents hidden for 75 years, right? Until long after we are all gone. Exactly. And the judge said no. And so the documents were released. So I read this, thank you so much, and as a journalist, I was concerned because I knew that journalists, thank you so much. Are not equipped to, as lay people, to understand the technical language in the documents. And I also knew that Pfizer was releasing 55,000 documents a month, and even that is a bit deceptive because these are documents that each of them can be 10,000 pages long, right? So a massive tranche of data, and that ordinary journalists, it was going to go into the memory hole unless we found specialized readers to read through, analyze, and interpret, and boil down into manageable reports. Thank you so much. What was in the Pfizer documents. So I went on War Room, which is another great irony of this moment. Are we good? Good, thank you so much. All right, thank you to this lovely lady who helped me be audible. Thank you. Thank you. I feel free here at Hillsdale. I can go anywhere. I can say anything. I went on War Room, which is, one of these great ironies of this moment, that Steve Bannon and I have this, interlocutory platform where he listens to what I have to say, which is a miracle because I got deplatformed a year and a half ago for doing what I've done for 35 years, which is reporting on women's reproductive and sexual health. In June of 2021, I reported on the fact that women were experiencing menstrual symptoms subsequent to receiving an mRNA injection. I'm a feminist. I've been a feminist forever. My first book was published when I was 26, and it is not unusual for me to call attention to symptoms that women are having that are red flags. Anyone who knows 8th grade biology can tell if women are having menstrual symptoms, there are going to be other bad things happening down the road. And sure enough, Twitter deplatformed me for this obvious observation, and I was also smeared globally, and it turns out another lawsuit subsequently found that it was the White House, the CDC, possibly DHS, and Twitter all unlawfully colluding to deplatform and smear me for making this observation about women's health. Yeah, but fast forward, I was talking on War Room about the release of these documents, and I called for experts to help us read through them, and miraculously, 2,500 experts responded to this call, right? Yes, yes. But the story is not over because I was ill-equipped to manage them. And so we had physicians, we had RNs, we had biostatisticians, medical fraud investigators, lab clinicians, research scientists, cardiologists, pathologists, anesthesiologists, some of the most distinguished scientists and medical people imaginable. But it's virtually impossible to manage 2,500 experts around the world, especially, if you don't have this background, wading through 55,000 documents a month. So again, the reason I tell this story is I really feel like something metaphysically beautiful is happening, even in the middle of something metaphysically hideous. And that is this tiny woman, Amy Kelly, this tiny doll-like woman, and I stress her tiny doll-like appearance because it's so stereotypical, but she's such a force of nature, right, belying those stereotypes. She offered to be our project manager. She stepped right in, and she just calmed the storm. And she organized these 2,500 experts, immediately 3,500 experts around the world, into 6 working groups with a committee at the head of each, who were busy churning out reports based on these primary source documents so that they could tell the world using the highest level of analysis possible, but broken down into language that everyone could understand what was in the Pfizer documents. So this is just stunning to me that this happened. So now there are 58 reports, and now is the sad part of what I have to tell you. The Pfizer documents contain evidence of the greatest crime against humanity in the history of our species. And I'm so sorry to have to walk you through this, but there's no way around it. We just have to go through. And the beauty of Hillsdale is that you all are tough and like truth. And so with truth, we can prevail. But it's painful. Some of the things that came to light, just some headlines. Pfizer knew, for instance, 1 month after rollout, so that's November of 2020, that the vaccines didn't work to stop COVID. Indeed, in the Pfizer documents, a month after rollout, and this is marketing, post-marketing, so it's out there, the spokesmodels are telling you to do it, the ads are in social media, the ads are on television. A month after rollout, Pfizer's internal documents identify that the vaccines have vaccine failure and failure of efficacy, and they identify that the third most common side effect of the Pfizer vaccine is COVID. The second headline, which is stunning, is that within a month or two, Pfizer was getting so many reports of adverse events, meaning bad things, happening to people who had been injected, that they understood that they needed to hire 2,400 full-time staffers in order simply to process the paperwork of the adverse events that they were receiving reports of, as well as to prepare for the flood of adverse events that they knew they would get in the near future. Pfizer knew in May of 2021 that the vaccines had caused heart damage in 35 minors within a week after the injection. And Pfizer knew, right? You've got to understand that all of these documents say FDA confidential at the bottom of them, right? Pfizer and the FDA shared these documents. And the FDA knew that 35 minors sustained heart damage. But the government of the United States, and I'm embarrassed to say I voted for these people, didn't tell parents until August of 2021 that there was an elevated risk of heart damage in healthy young adults. 4 months later, and in those 4 months, what did the young adults of America receive? A constant battering with propaganda on social media, on television, in news outlets, bought up by money in the CARES Act, as well as from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with influencers showing off their injection site, saying, we can do this together, we can be strong, do it for grandma. All of this aimed at young adults. They did not tell the young adults, the healthy young adults of the United States, your generation, that this was elevating a risk of heart damage till 4 months later. You may recall that the CDC said that the materials of the injection stay in the injection site. And the materials are lipid nanoparticles, they are mRNA, and the lipid nanoparticles are an industrial fat, which is covered in polyethylene glycol, which is a petroleum byproduct, right? And spike protein. Well, the CDC said it stays in the injection site. And then it says, and I remember asking doctors, like relatives who are doctors and were funded by NIH grants, where does the spike protein go? And they were like, when you're a journalist, you've got an ear for nonsense. They were like, well, your body metabolizes it, or, well, you'll digest it and excrete it. And it's like they had no evidence to give me, to show me the basis for their response. But in fact, that's not what happens to these materials. And Pfizer knew that. These materials biodistribute, this is Pfizer's language, throughout your body in 48 hours. And where do they settle? Lipid nanoparticles are designed to cross every membrane in the human body. They've known this for 10 years. So where do these ingredients go? They go to the brain. Some of you have noticed changes in the personalities of loved ones who have taken these injections. They biodistribute to the liver, the adrenals, the spleen, and if you're a woman, they accumulate in your ovaries. Now, these are industrial fats coated with polyethylene glycol in your ovaries, okay? And what's really scary, Dr. Robert Chandler, who's a respected pathologist who's treated the Lakers and the Angels, he wrote this report, and he shows that the chart shows the graph going down as it leaves the injection site, but going up as it accumulates in these various organs over time. And what's incredibly scary if you're a woman is that there's no mechanism that we've found by which the body gets rid of the lipid nanoparticles in the ovaries. So your first injection, some go into your ovaries. Your second injection, more go into your ovaries. Your booster, more go into your ovaries. There's no mechanism with which the body can release this material that we've seen. And Pfizer knew. So the lipid nanoparticles, as I mentioned, cross every membrane in the human body. And not unexpectedly or not surprisingly, in the Pfizer documents, it shows that in only 3 months there were 1,200 plus deaths out of 42,000 plus adverse events. And there are catastrophic categories of the kinds of side effects that people sustain. And what's so heartbreaking to me knowing this is that these are not the same side effects that the CDC tells you about or your doctor tells you about. The CDC will say, you'll have fatigue, you'll have chills maybe, there'll be a little swelling at the injection site. That's not what's in the Pfizer documents. There's, at industrial scale, strokes, hemorrhages, blood clots, lung clots, leg clots, neurological disorders, dementia-type disorders, Guillain-Barré, Bell's palsy. The neurological disorders are at industrial scale, but also side effects you don't necessarily expect. But now that I know about them, I see them everywhere. The number one side effect is joint pain, which is so interesting, right? Did the CDC tell you about joint pain? And yet I know healthy young adults who are limping or who have had knee problems or shoulder problems, their shoulders separated. Well, think about lipid nanoparticles. They go through every membrane. They're going through cartilage. They're destabilizing cartilage. And the other surprising side effect is myalgia, muscle pain. And again, I know healthy men in their 40s and 50s, ate right, went to the gym, all the things, organic food, in constant pain from muscle pain. And that's right there at industrial scale in the Pfizer documents. But you are not told about that. But in addition, I don't say lightly that it's mass murder. There are 61 deaths from stroke, for example. Half of the stroke adverse events took place within 48 hours of the injection. There are 5 deaths from liver damage, and half of the liver damage adverse events took place within 48 hours of the injection. Now, one of the most disturbing reports is Report 56, which is about children. And this is so chilling. So the emergency use authorization for children didn't get passed until about 4 or 5 months ago. But in early 2021, in other words, when it wasn't legal to do this, Pfizer injected 62 kids, some of them as young as 2 months old. 28 of them, we don't know what happened to them. That we don't know if they survived. Among the 34 whose records are still in the Pfizer documents, there's a 7-year-old British girl who sustained a stroke, and there's a 2-month-old baby with liver damage. And so this is such a chilling report because it's clear, and we did additional investigation of this, there were 1,000 kids in the United States in different university hospitals, including Rochester Medical Center, that were experimented on prior to it being legal to inject children with this material. And I can promise you, these are what society calls throwaway kids. These are not kids whose parents have lawyers. These are not kids with whose parents have a voice. We're going to find that these are kids who are institutionalized, who are orphaned or discarded in some way and used in this way. Now I want to dial. Are you guys okay? Can I keep going? Okay, all right. It's tough. Now I want to go to the centerpiece of what we found in the Pfizer documents. It's not even the deaths. It's not even the disabilities. What is abundantly clear, and I don't say this lightly, I'm Jewish, my grandmother lost 9 brothers and sisters in the Holocaust. I don't talk about Mengele or Nazi experiments lightly. But in the center of the documents, there is a literally Mengele-type experiment at a grand scale on human reproduction. 360-degree experiment on how to disrupt and impair human reproduction. So, for example, in the Pfizer documents, women were told not to get pregnant, which is interesting, right? It's a respiratory disease. Why would you tell women not to get pregnant? But nonetheless, 270 women got pregnant. Out of those 270 women, Pfizer lost the records, which is illegal. You're supposed to, by law, follow subjects to the end of the trial. They lost the records of 234 of these pregnant women. Of the 36 women whose pregnancies came to term, over 80% of them lost their babies. Spontaneous abortion or miscarriage. Many people have asked me, is shedding real? Right? Anecdotally, and in fact, I got deplatformed because I reported that women were describing disruptions in their own menstrual cycles or feeling ill around other women, like coworkers who had recently received an injection. Shedding is real. In the Pfizer documents, Pfizer defines exposure to the vaccine as skin contact, inhalation, and sexual intercourse, especially at conception. And this is very bad news, and I'm sorry, but they seem to identify the risk or the transmission of exposure to the vaccine as male to female in sexual intercourse. And they specifically told the men in the trials not to have intercourse with childbearing age women, and if they did, to use 2 reliable forms of birth control. So there was clearly something about conceiving with a vaccinated male that Pfizer was guarding against. So we know now that there's horrific damages to conception from this injection. As I keep saying, the lipid nanoparticles traverse every membrane. The placenta is a membrane. Of course, I mean, the most sacred place in the world is the placenta with a baby gestating in it, right? You can't impair or compromise that membrane without damaging that fetus and that fetal environment. The lipid nanoparticles traverse the placenta, they get into the environment of the fetus, and maternal fetal medicine specialist named Dr. Jim Thorpe has found in his patients that the placentas have a network of calcifications caused by these lipid nanoparticles, and babies are being delivered earlier because of these impaired or compromised placentas, and he's seeing at great scale chromosomal abnormalities in newborns of vaccinated mothers. Lipid nanoparticles in the Pfizer documents are also revealed to enter breast milk. And this stands to reason. Remember, we were told, oh, these materials stay in the injection site. Well, they're circulating through the blood. What is breast milk made of? It's built up out of blood and lymph. So the lipid nanoparticles covered in polyethylene glycol are entering breast milk of nursing mothers, and nursing babies in the Pfizer documents sustain seizures. And one baby died in the ER after nursing from a vaccinated mother from multi-organ system failure. 4 of the moms who are lactating in the Pfizer documents had breast milk that turned blue-green. And by the way, this is not just the Pfizer documents. The NIH did a study subsequently that also found that babies nursing from vaccinated moms were having failure to thrive, not putting on weight. They were agitated and restless and sleepless. They downplayed it. But I want to tell you, like, as a woman, just for a moment, it's hard, right? It's hard enough to be a healthy woman, menstruating, conceiving a baby, carrying a baby, delivering a baby, nursing a baby. These are great, great gifts, but they take a lot of strength and stamina and, social support and love. They're not easy to do. And nursing a baby is not easy to do at its easiest, when you're at your most healthy. So I want to tell you that as a woman and as a feminist and as a mom, when I read that nursing mothers have gone in the last 2 years from 34% of all moms to 16% of moms, something's wrong, right? Not only are babies in the next generation not getting that primal experience of total love, total nurture, total safety, which is so important, but there's something that is leading the moms to not be able to nurse those babies. And I think we have a clue here in the contamination of vaccinated moms' breast milk. I also want to note that Bill Gates rolled out lab-grown breast milk right at the moment that women were suffering these harms to their own ability to sustain their children. Dr. Chandler, in the Pfizer documents, I'm also going to say it's a constant theme as a war against women, and really a war against women's ability to reproduce. In the Pfizer documents, Dr. Chandler found that of the adverse events, 72% of them were sustained by women. And this is constant throughout. It's a constant 3-to-1 women to men. It's not that men are not being harmed, but it's that women are being harmed so disproportionately. And of the 72% of adverse events, there's this chart, which is so hard to look at, in the Pfizer documents, in which Pfizer defines 16% of those adverse events as, quote, their words, reproductive disorders. Their words. In that chart, and this is 0.49 for men, not that that's not, bad, it's bad, but it's like, what kind of monsters look at 16% reproductive disorders and keep going? In that chart, in that section of the documents, there's a kind of a subchart with names, scientific names. And again, if you're a woman or a mom, this is going to make your head explode. There are 20 different scientific names for ruining women's menstrual cycles in that chart, right there. And this is why I say Nazi medicine, because it's bad enough what the Nazis did, but an additional layer of what's chilling and anti-human is how scientific their records were. So there's a scientific name for having 2 periods a month, or a scientific name for bleeding every single day of the month, or a scientific name for not having any menstrual cycle at all month, and you can assume you're not fertile or not easily fertile under those circumstances. Horrible, there are children in the audience, so I don't want to get too graphic, but scientific names for the most horrible things you can imagine being done to the bodies of women. Women years postmenopausal, bleeding, 10-year-old girls having menarche upon being injected, and horrible things that I won't describe being part of women's experience of menstruation. So I just want you for a minute to imagine, as educators and as parents, not even as students, because I feel like I'm burdening you enough with this information, but think about how hard it is. Women have so many jobs, right? They're students, they're moms, they're workers, they're wives, they're parents. I guess I said moms. It's a big job. And now imagine doing that with this debilitating health condition, let alone trying to just conceive a baby and bring a baby to term and have a healthy delivery. So not surprisingly, and this relates directly to my being deplatformed a year and a half ago, not that what happened to me personally is important compared to what happened to everyone, not surprisingly, in 2022, around the world, 9 months after the rollout in most of Western Europe, there's a 13 to 20% drop in live births all over Western Europe and North America. And Singapore and Australia, 13 to 20% drop in live births, with stunning sub-data like double the number of stillbirths in Scotland, a highly vaccinated country, 89 stillbirths in Canada in one province when usually they have 2 or 3. Dr. Thorpe describes 5 or 6 miscarriages a week when before they would have 2 a month. Absolute baby die-off is what I called it in an early essay. about this. So let me now tell you, this is not universal. It's not around the world. This drop, this murder of the next generation is not global. It's Western Europe and North America. And I'll get to the meaning of that shortly. So I mentioned that men and boys are not, spared. Amy Kelly, for instance, found that lipid nanoparticles degrade baby boys in utero. They don't even have to be vaccinated. The lipid of course, the testes are a membrane, so these lipid nanoparticles traverse the testes of fetal baby boys and degrade the Sertoli cells and the Leydig cells, which are basically the factories of masculinity. So we don't know if these little baby boys of vaccinated moms are going to be able to grow up to be sexually functioning adult men. The Sertoli cells and Leydig cells are responsible for the male hormonal balance that create things like deep voices, hair on their bodies, broad shoulders, all of the things that we associate with normal masculinity, and that is being degraded. And again, when I say why this focus on reproduction, it's a respiratory virus, right? So why in the Pfizer documents did they mate rats, sacrifice the rats, and then analyze the cells of the sexual organs of the rats? Right? It's a respiratory virus. So these are monsters, and there's no way to avoid concluding that they're focused on disrupting human reproduction. So that's a lot. And now I'm going to step back and put it in geopolitical context and answer some of the questions about why, from my point of view. Very hard to process that anyone would do this. It's very tempting to think, well, they're just greedy. They couldn't stop. They were making so much money. These are oversights. We've had greedy corporations in our history before, the jungle, right? That's not what this is, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry to tell you. I firmly believe, and I'll give you my evidence now, that this is a bioweapon and that we're under attack. So let me step back now and tell you who made the Pfizer injection. You may well think, as I did, that a German company made the Pfizer injection, but that's not true, or that's not the whole truth. Pfizer is a German-Chinese company, and specifically its subsidiary BioNTech, which it purchased right before the pandemic, is a German-Chinese company. BioNTech signed an MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding, with Fosun Pharmaceuticals in 2021. So Fosun Pharma is wholly owned by the Chinese Communist Party. It's one of the biggest and most important pharmaceutical companies in China. And you may not know that every corporation in China is basically run by the Chinese Communist Party or answers to the Chinese Communist Party. So, pardon me, which is why it's nonsense for Dr. Fauci to think that, Wuhan is a bunch of independent scientists scampering along doing nice things for America. They're run by the CCP and by the People's Liberation Army of China. So Fosun Pharma, whose CEO is a senior official in the CCP, didn't just sign an MOU with BioNTech, but in 2021, if you look at the SEC filing, which is our stock exchange filing for BioNTech, it shows 100% completed tech transfer of the technology, the IP, from BioNTech to China. It doesn't say to a Chinese individual, to a Chinese company. It says the words to China, which means that right now in 2023, if you get a Pfizer injection, you're getting an injection whose IP, and IP can mean the formula that they're using. It can mean the data harvested from using it. It can mean the manufacturing process. It can mean any of those. But all of that is owned by China now when it goes into your American body in America. Not only that, Fosun Pharma, they don't give this injection to the people of China. And by the way, I'm an anti-racist. This is not an anti-Chinese position I'm taking. It's an anti-Chinese Communist Party position I'm taking because they want to kill us, okay? So the manufacturing plants, this stuff is not going into the people on the mainland of China. BioNTech and Fosun created 1 billion doses, and they opened 13 manufacturing plants in Western Europe to distribute these doses. And they opened 2 of them in the United States of America. One is in Princeton, New Jersey, and one is in Springfield, Massachusetts. CCP-owned manufacturing plants producing the injection that goes into the bodies of school children here in the United States of America. Now, in 2018, there was a study by a group of Chinese scientists that showed that lipid nanoparticles damage fertility, mammalian fertility. So they knew when they were making up this formula that it did this. In 2021, there was a study in Hong Kong, which again is overseen by the Chinese Communist Party, that showed that the first injection enlarges the heart, causes some problems in rats, and the second injection causes catastrophic harms in those rats. The hearts are enlarged, there's visible white patches on the hearts, and it's multi-organ system failure again. So to me, I'm not a scientist, and it's kind of lucky. I come from the world of politics and journalism. To me, it is obvious that that's an experiment to show the Chinese Communist Party how you kill Westerners without leaving fingerprints. There's more I can tell you about why I believe this is a bioweapon. Think about who got mandated. And I'm very much influenced in my conclusions about this by my husband, Brian O'Shea, who spent 12 years in military intelligence and then in the intelligence community. And from the very beginning was saying, this is China, it's a bioweapon. And I was like, honey, I love you, but that's crazy. And then he showed me so much primary source documentation that there's no way to avoid this conclusion. But look at who got mandated with these injections. And as a political consultant, you learn to reason backwards. You look at the effect and then you draw conclusions from the effect, because the story is made up always, right? You learn that as a political consultant. The principals will set a goal. They'll say, get us to this goal. And then the chief of staff goes to the message shop, meaning the storytellers, and says, tell a story to get people to accept this goal. And that's how politics works. So what is the effect, right? I'm not asking you to think about the story, which is save your grandma, do it for the community, right? Safe and effective. That's the story. The effect, who got mandated? Our military got mandated. Our first responders, our healthcare workers, our doctors and nurses got mandated. Why? The vaccine doesn't affect transmission. We know that. Why? Right? How do you cripple a society? Our elites' kids got mandated. I just spoke at Yale. I have loved ones at Princeton. I have loved ones at Cornell. These parents are distraught, which is why I love Hillsdale so much. But, how to cripple a country, take out the kids of the leaders, right? Take out the kids of the wealthy, the kids of the elite. Who else got mandated? Firefighters got mandated. All the people we need in order to defend ourselves are the ones who got mandated. Pilots got mandated, right? Cripple a society. They went for those populations. And they went for those populations rigidly, right? There's no reason that every university except 6, including Hillsdale, had to mandate the kids, except that HHS gave them the money and they said you have to do it, right? Well, this is a captured administration and captured institutions that are allowing the CCP and their allies, the World Economic Forum, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to cripple our country. As Brian put it, the CCP wants our land, they want our natural resources, they don't want our people. So that's what you've got. And later studies like those of Ed Dowd show that disability among 18 to 39-year-olds is off the charts, which is just what you want in what's called an asymmetric warfare, which is the CCP likes to not have a kinetic war, but to kind of degrade and demoralize a population rather than having a hot war with shooting. And that's exactly what's going on. And the last thing I'll say for my evidence is that of the adverse events, I mentioned there are 42,000 of them in the Pfizer documents. 36,000 plus are in the United States. About 8,000 plus are in Western Europe in order of political importance. So Britain, Germany, France, Spain, Greece, Italy, like that. Out of all the rest of the adverse events, 7,000 adverse events, roughly, all the 51 countries around the world other than Western Europe and North America where this was deployed, all of those only account for 7,000. So that's not random, right? That's targeting North America and Western Europe. And the last thing I'll say for my evidence that this is a bioweapon, and this is super, super chilling and creepy, is that it's so easy to target a subject with this injection by things as simple as temperature or dose. Because lipid nanoparticles are liquid at super cold temperatures. You remember the news stories about it has to be really chilled, they have to have special refrigerators. That's true. But lipid nanoparticles coalesce, clot, solidify at room temperature and at body temperature. And what you've seen is the guidance about how to store these has changed constantly. So first it was like, keep it in the freezer. And then it was like, you can leave it out for 2 hours. Then it was like, you can leave it out for 6 hours. So there's constant variation in the directions originating from China about how to store this injection, and temperature alone can cause problems. And the other thing I'll tell you is dose. And this is absolutely horrific, but Pfizer dose of active ingredients is 30 micrograms. Moderna is 100 micrograms, more than 3 times as much. And someone I love got injured by the Moderna vaccine. Well, in the Pfizer documents, it says that 100 micrograms is so high, they had to drop it internally due to its reactogenicity, Pfizer's words. But they didn't tell everyone who got the Moderna dose that this was too high and they shouldn't take a booster. They just kept going. Do you know what the dosage is for children? They want it to be 100 micrograms. Tiny children. So that is my incredibly dark summary to you of what's in the Pfizer documents. I now want to pivot in just the minute or two I have left to happier thoughts, because I don't want you to leave here, clinically depressed and giving up all hope. There's a lot of hope in truth. And again, that's why I love this community, even though I'm brand new here. Because the most horrible things can be faced if you embrace this principle of liberty and of truth and community. So Pfizer has announced that they have 430 million doses that have expired because no one wants them. And it's vanishingly small numbers of parents who have given in to the relentless propaganda to vaccinate their children with this mRNA injection. So informed consent makes a difference, and informed consent is the law, which people conveniently forgot in the medical establishment in the last 2.5 years. We have lawyers suing Pfizer, and I do believe, and there are a lot of good bills that are being introduced to strip Pfizer of its impunity from lawsuits. And I thoroughly hope and believe we're looking at a mass murder situation, a war crimes against humanity. And I believe and hope that all of these evildoers, as friendly as they look in their little outfits, talking to the cameras, I hope they will all face justice in this lifetime. And the last thing I want to say, and I promise I'll make it fast and I'll take questions, is this has been such a hard journey, you know, for me and for Amy Kelly and for all these volunteers to go on, because we're really looking at this abyss of human evil every single day. It's like looking at Baba Yar, you know, when that was first opened to the world. It's completely hard to believe that such a thing has taken place and is still taking place. But I guess very quickly, I just want to say that this experience has forced me to believe in God more literally than I had before. And I know that sounds paradoxical, but I felt like this evil overtook the world in lockstep, in perfect unison, in a way that I could not explain using my critical thinking, my great education. It didn't act like any history previously, right? It was far less random. And there was something metaphysical about it, you know, and the way people were just lost in delusion, all in one delusion. The media all told one lie. Doctors who were healers one minute were death dealers the next minute. Something absolutely metaphysical about it that went beyond human history. So I do believe I've concluded, I don't have answers, but I've concluded that we're in a time, like really a biblical moment, where humanity is being asked to choose, basically. And I mean, this is very subjective, but I kind of believe that God is going, okay, this is how bad humans can be if you lose touch with me. You know, it's this bad. So I don't really know the answer to that except to say out loud, which I never used to do, that I believe that. And, you know, and I guess, you know, I read the Bible a lot these days, and I read the Old Testament a lot. And I keep turning to, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. So I believe that. So God willing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So you've heard just a few things that I listen to. I listen to so many things on a daily basis. It would be overwhelming if you just got the whole scope of what I listen to. But hopefully it'll start you on a path of self-discovery. I want you to be able to be wise consumers, and your health is a consumable product. It has a beginning date and an end date. And in between there, it's going to be up to you guys. So once, as I usually say, do not leave that important choice in the hands of other people. So until next time, please take care of yourself. If you haven't thought to already, please go to see Anecdotals on Monday at Speciality Cinema and get a little bit more knowledge from their point of view on some of the people who stepped up, took the jab, and things didn't go out as well as they expected. But until next time, please be safe. Please know you are loved. Please know that you are wanted. And don't go anywhere, because I'm assuming that the Need to Lead will be on after me. Have a great day.
That you need God, and may your battles in the way they should, and may your bad days prove that God is good, and may your whole life prove that God is good. See, may your struggles keep you near the cross, and may your troubles show that you need God, and may your battles in the way they should, and may your bad days prove that God is good. See, may your whole life prove that God is good. See, may your struggles keep you may your battles in the way they should, and may your bad days prove that God is good. See, let your whole life prove that God is good.
Thank y'all so much for coming out.
May your bad days prove that God is.
You need to get vaccinated. You need to mask up. And if you don't, you are going to die.
The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them. What else? Or leave them behind.
If we could all just stop having so many answers and listen with wonder and listen with compassion.
We need humanity back.
This is not political. This is a human issue.
I don't want what I'm experiencing to have some sort of political bent. I just want my story out there so I and others like me can get the help that we are entitled to.
Being vaccine injured, I've seen hate from both sides.
Join us at Specialty Cinema for the second screening of Anecdotals in Bermuda on Monday, April 17th at 7 p.m. Tickets are available at Specialty Cinema or jointhecast.org.